a cup. Good morning from the shelf. Super fast.
Good morning, welcome to the morning coffee show. Let's talk from in the shell and share good vibes and good times. Good friends and trends that bend the senses. Let's get a bit senseless. Welcome to the morning coffee show, where we bring good vibes and good times. Welcome to the morning coffee show with super fast tortoise. Welcome to the morning coffee show, where we have the flow. Good vibes from head to toe.
Oh, hello. Welcome to the show, the morning thing. I just played the intro because it's cool.
What's up?
Got Hillbilly here. He was nice enough to show up and hang out with me while I talk about this cool topic, this hot topic that people are always looking for, especially for beginners. And we got a heavy topic to go through. Holy cow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot in this topic, and I needed someone to bounce off of. That's why I asked for Hillbilly to be here.
Yeah. Well, I'm fairly new at building commander decks. I mean, I know the concept of it, but that's about it.
Right, and there's a lot to go over for sure, but you'll have questions, and I need that.
Yeah. It ain't like, building a standard deck.
Mhm.
Totally different world.
Oh yeah, it is a totally different world for sure, because it's easier to get tempo in a standard deck than it is to get a commander deck.
Yep.
That's very true. Very true indeed. But anyways, like you're working on one commander deck right now. You're working on the Edgar Markov.
Yep.
Yeah, it's true. It's true, everybody. He's working on Edgar Markov. Sorry, I'm doing a quick setup of things really quick. As we start the streaming, hear the echoing. There we go. Oh yeah, I went over there for a reason, and that's to pin that message. There you go. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you have anything going on. So, whew, like I said, we got a lot to go over. So I have to get to this page. It says today we're going through tips to help you build a better commander deck. Tips to help you build better commander decks indeed. Tips and advice on building decks and thinking critically for a beginner or novice new player and deck builder. Yeah, you'll be building decks. You're newer to building decks. This live is going to help you out a lot. Let me see if I can mitigate some of this stuff. Let's push you over there. Scroll you over there. Sorry, I'm trying to make it where I can read chat and read the script.
Oh, you're fine.
So, like I said, we're going to go through a lot of discussion here that's going to help a newer player learn how to function as a better deck builder. And just to let you know, I got some Mountain Dew set aside, so when I run out of my coffee, I don't have to get up and go. Unless emergencies happen, that's a different story.
I'm drinking water. Half invisible water, as you can tell.
That's funny. So, how can you trust my word as a deck builder? Well, I'm someone who usually builds decks between power levels 5 and 7 on an average, and I'm pretty good at it too. And I could build better decks if funding was allowed, because some cards are expensive.
Oh yeah.
But deck power levels 5 through 7 are also known as bracket 3 decks now, as we are into the bracket world. And building a Magic the Gathering deck for Commander is pretty easy, yet hard to master.
I don't think I would ever like that bracket system.
Who knows? It depends on how it sticks around and how it improves.
True.
All right. When building a Commander deck, you got to take the notion out of your game is random. Sorry. When building a Commander deck, you got to take the notion that the game is random out of your head. And think of it, it's already decided. If your deck's in the low powered level, you already lost the game. There's chances you can win the game, but the chances are low. Especially if your deck is not up to snuff. I can see. I bet some of the wording in the description's off because some things were manually or randomly deleted.
Oh,
If your deck is not to snuff, you want to implement my tips that I'm going to bring to you guys today, right? And I do have tips for you
cool.
guys to learn for sure, and you're going to learn a lot. Let me see, where are we? And we might not see our faces very much, but this is stuff we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about card draw, mana ramp, and color fixing, removal of board wipes, reanimation, graveyard recursion, synergy, and expanding upon it to exploit it. We're going to talk about the BREAD acronym: bombs, removal, evasion, aggro, and draw. We're going to talk about top deck manipulation and tutors. We're going to talk about fast mana, tri-lands, I spelled try wrong, and perfect mana. Instants, sorceries, and enchantments and stuff like that. Bombs and win cons is what we're going to talk about. So hold on. Sorry. I was kind of rushing myself to get the script on time, and I was 20 minutes late by the time I got the show put together. All right. So let's let me delete that. So I'm trying to rush.
Man, you got plenty of time.
So let's make the process a little easier to start with. When you're building a deck, you should run 36 to 38 lands. My suggestion is to run 37 lands out of your 99 card deck and commander. So you have 99 cards, 37 of those cards are lands, you're going to assume. So that's leaving you 62 cards to build your commander deck around. So out of 99, you drop down to 62. Simple as that. You got 62 cards. That's an even number. And that should help you build around and help you make decisions when knowing you got so many slots. And we'll get more into that too, because that gets a little deeper as we get into this deck building process. And this number, 62 cards, does not include your commander. Your commander is not in the deck, so it doesn't count in the 62 cards, because your commander should be decided by the time you start building your deck.
Ah, okay.
Right? Because the commander should do a few things for you right away, right? The commander should tell you 3 things. You don't have to fulfill all 3 of these things to have a good commander and deck idea, but it should tell you at least 2 of these 3 things. 1, it should tell you what your deck's energy is. 2, it should tell you what your deck needs to protect it and how. And 3, what is your win condition, or what should it be? Is your commander your win condition, or is it other cards in your deck your win condition? Those 3 things should be determined when you choose your commander. You can choose a fun commander, any commander, like Rafika the Mini. Rafika the Mini is a good commander. You can win with Rafika the Mini, but you want to build a deck around Rafika the Mini that Voltron's a big creature to double striking. Rafika the Mini costs 4 mana. It's like a 3/3 with Exalted. When a creature attacks alone, it gets +1/+1. But it also says if a creature you control attacks alone, gains double strike. So your commander is a tool to help a big creature do critical damage. Edgar Markov is a commander that makes you little 1/1 little vampire tokens. You're not going to win with Medicare Markov in the battlefield most of the time. He's a good creature, he has haste and everything, but you're going to use him to exploit the vampire creature tokens. So how are you going to use the vampire creature tokens? You're going to play vampires to get those tokens, because Vedka Markov says whenever you cast a vampire spell, create a 1/1 vampire creature token. Then what your win condition is something else. Is it going to be life loss in the game? Are you going to build a life loss deck? Or are you going to take those tokens you're getting for free for casting spells to sacrifice them for special effects that you can get in black? Very well. So that's what you should determine when you choose him, And there's other commanders you can choose. Hold on. Yeah, other commanders that you can choose, that have specific conditions that you want to care about, right? It's like specific conditions you want to care about based off your commander will help you do a couple things. Like, first of all, when you get your commander figured out, what it tells you, what you want your deck to be, it helps you put in the criteria of the next 2 questions I have to ask. So if you got Medicare Markov, you have to ask, is my deck aggro, mid-range, or control? And you're going to build that deck based on your decision right there. Is like, and that's not three questions. It's one question saying, what is it out of these three things? Is my deck aggro, mid range, or control? Am I building an aggro deck that works on aggressive attacking creatures, or is it mid range where it's a mix of control and combat, or is it all control where you're controlling the board so you can get to your win condition? You know, the question is, the question two that we're getting to is my deck reliant on creatures, enchantments, artifacts, non-creature spells? You know, I forgot to put a question mark in there. But so you want to know, is your deck reliant on creatures, enchantments, artifacts, or non-creature spells to win? So based on your commander deck, you want to figure that out so you know what your synergy is going to be. Like Edgar Markov, I'm using him because you're here.
Mm-hmm.
His ability heavily relies on playing vampire creatures. So you're going to work on whatever vampires you can get, and you're going to work for the best things that fit in the criteria of the BREAD acronym. Or you're going to find the best way to get controlling vampires and control with them. You know, that's what you want to figure out when you have a good vampire or a good commander. You know, how does it go? Well, what your deck going to rely on? Because like I got an enchantment deck that really relies on enchantments, so my synergies are going to be enchantments. But if I have a prowess deck and my creature runs off non-creature spells like planeswalkers or instants and sorceries, that's going to matter how I build my deck. And that's going to show me how I feel in the BREAD acronym, which we'll cover the BREAD acronym in the future of this.
Okay.
All right.
Now, how do you know exactly what you're? I know Edgar Markov what he does.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you play a vampire, you get a token.
Right.
But how do you really decide on which way he wants to go?
So the best way to decide, like someone like Edgar Markov, way to go, is what you have available resourced to you, right? First of all, look at his colors. His colors are red, white, and black. Aggro,
Right.
white removal, and black removal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the strongest thing you got. Plus, you got board wipes ready to you. So when you build an Edgar Markov, your strongest suit is removal because it's in two of the colors you're running. Because like you got path deck removal spells like enchantments like Oblivion Ring, so on and so forth. Because Oblivion Ring is still a powerful remove spell because it targets a permanent, not a creature. You know, and black has destroy target creature and planeswalkers all day.
Mm-hmm.
Remove enchantment destroyers in it. They can destroy all enchantments off some cards, or it can destroy target enchantment, or remove two enchantments. You know, so it's telling you what you're going to have power over there. So you got a control aspect. Your aggro aspect in red is your small time creatures and stuff like that. But out of the three colors, two of your colors had different ways to draw. You have black that pains you life and draws, or you have red that says, you know, discard a card, draw a card, or exile the top card of your library and draw a card. So you're looking at the colors of your commander, you know, to kind of help figure out things. So for example, if I was an Esper, blue, white, black, I have good permanent removal in black and white, but blue doesn't have good permanent removal. It does bounce permanents and stuff, but it has better draw. So I'm going to put a more focus on the draw and the removal I got in that coloring. Or if I'm doing Teamer, blue, red, green, blue, red, green is pretty solid for ramping, drawing cards, and being aggro. So I know the BREAD acronym will fit me better in there. Now, there's different token synergies and other synergies in Teamer, but when you're looking at the powerhouse of the colors, I know my strongest suits is ramping and drawing and big ol' smasher creatures with hasty engines. Because in big creature decks, red has haste, like Fervor. Fervor is a red enchantment that says creatures control have haste. It has other things like that. So it gives my big creatures with trample or whatever haste. So it gives it more of a teeth.
Okay. How do you decide on how many creatures and how many spells of each type to put into a deck?
Okay, we're actually getting to that very shortly. So I'll answer that question shortly. Right.
Okay.
So to recap what I just went over, this is when you ask your questions, my deck aggro, mid-range, or control. That's what you're figuring. Aggro is more creature, mid-range is a mix between creatures removal and control can be a mix of creatures, but it's usually more enchantments and non-creature spells. You know, that's so, and that makes you wonder what your creatures are going for, right? So the next part of this will help answer your questions. What brings up the big question is, what is your deck's win conditions? How are you winning in your deck, right? How are you winning, right? You got to figure this out before you start building your deck. What do you want to win with? Like, for example, your Edgar Markov deck, you always try to win with combo effects where your opponents lose life, you gain life, and to get a combo out really quick.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I got several ways to get that combo out, but that's really the only combo in it. What other
Right,
combo could I put into it?
Well, shortly you'll have another piece to that combo to add to your deck. 2 new pieces actually. But you'll also have more ways to look for it, because like your combo pieces as a creature and a vampire, you have an enchantment, 2 enchantments and stuff that go with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your win conditions telling you want to get to this life gain, life loss synergy. So you got to think of your synergy as, I want to do a lot of life loss and life gain. You know, and mono black, if you were running mono black, you'd run a lot of little sacrifice outlets and stuff like that, and mitigate removal things, right? You're gonna mitigate removal things with reanimation and stuff like that. But you're also gonna do a lot of sack outlet things. You're gonna sacrifice things. You're gonna find ways to implement this life loss, even if you don't get to your combo, because your combo is life. Your win con is draining your opponent's life like a vampire. You know,
Right.
So I think those some of the things you're going to lead into and get into is like finding ways to get that life losses. Because if you don't pull off your combo, you want to win somehow. So you're going to try to find ways to do that anyways.
Okay.
All right. So like I said, which brings us up to the big question is, what's your deck's win conditions? How do you want to win? What do you want to win with? How do you get there? These are questions that you should ask before deck building, because it is important for you to decide this before your deck is starting to be built. Because in Commander, you 3 win conditions, up to 7 winning conditions, 7 strategies. And if you build your deck right, you can reach your goal sometimes without even reaching your win conditions, but by finding continuous sources to repeat the process, which will be answered on how a little bit later. Right?
Okay.
Then once all that is figured out, you want to look at your basic wants in a deck. You know, a deck is kind of like a child, you know, or a pet. Let's just say a pet. It's a lot easier. Let's say your deck's like a pet. There's basic needs. It needs food. It needs water. It needs a place to sleep. It needs the comforts of life. And a deck has comforts of life and basic needs, right? Like, for instance, card draw. Card draw is on the top of this list. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tips right here that we're going to cover. And draw is on the first one, as the first one on this list, because card draw is the most important. Because when you don't have mana ramp or mana fixing easily readily to you, you have to have draw. Card draw, you want at least 7 card draw spells plus additional synergies that fit your theme in your deck. So, when I say card draw spells, you know, red's kind of tough on that, but there's card draw spells in red. There's card spells draws in black. You want 7 of them. Now, when you look at that, you want to take like Edgar Markov and be like, what are the best draw spells in black I can get my hands on? Phyrex and Arena. A decent one. Not as strong as it used to be back in the day, but it's decent. Cards that draw you bigger grips of cards, like the one that costs 2 black mana and X and draws you X cards, you lose X life. Sometimes a better grip one, it can draw you 5 cards. But if you can find, like in mono black, where you sacrifice a creature and you draw a card, which there is, that's a really strong synergy in life pinger decks, like aristocratic style decks. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because like You can put like 7 card draw spells in your deck, and that could be really good and really strong. But if you can find card draw synergies that fit your synergy in your deck, like if you can find ways to get vampires that draw you cards, which there are ways, or just creatures in general, because not every creature in your deck has to be a vampire for this to work. If you can find different ways to draw cards that fit your life draining synergy, that could be from treasure tokens to just drawing cards for sacrifice a creature, you do it. And now I mean treasure tokens, I mean clue tokens.
I also got Vampiric Rites. It's a good card draw card.
Yes, Vampiric Rites is part of that sacrificing synergy I was talking about, because as the cost to cast that spell, you sacrifice a creature or discard a card, I think.
You pay 1 and pay 2, generic and a black, sack a creature, and gain 1 life and draw a card.
Yeah, there you go. All right. So in that instance, you're sacrificing a creature. So in a deck that runs spells like that for sacrificing creatures, one thing you want to look for synergy is what happens to that creature when it dies. Do you have a spell that mitigates effects? I say mitigate, but mitigate's the wrong word. Do you have a spell that enhances that creature's death? Like, it's a good card with that. And I know you have a copy of it in another deck, and it'd be a good choice to get these additional copies as cards is like Grave Pact
Mm-hmm.
and Dictate of Erebos, where it says when a creature controlled dies, each opponent sacrifices the creatures.
Yeah, I got Grave Pack, but I don't have that other one that you just mentioned.
Dictate of Erebos.
Yeah, I don't have that card.
You need to get those for your vampire deck because you sacrifice a lot of creatures and you want to be able to really get that sacrifice some power, because card draws is the topic we're on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And card draw is good for tempo, which tempo, I can skip to this really quick. Tempo is the speed which cards can be played and gathered. How fast you can cast spells and recoup lost cards from basic game interactions from your hand or brought back from the graveyard, helping you mitigate land drop issues so you can continue to play spells and hold mana back for removal and counter spells.
Okay.
So part of your synergies, like in your deck, you do sacrifice creatures a lot, you do lose creatures a lot.
Mm-hmm.
In a game of Magic, you lose creatures a lot. So having things that say, when my creature dies, such and such a thing happens, that's synergy to the basic game state that you're playing. Like not game state, but game synergy, right? Because there's natural synergy in a deck, like in a game of Magic. So there's basic play synergies, like landfall is a basic play synergy and a mechanic in Magic the Gathering. You playing lands. One of the main points you do in Magic is play lands so you can play bigger spells, right? Landfall is an ability that just tropes the idea of it, like just encourages it to be better. Like every time you play land, something you're basically going to do anyways, it gives you an effect, an ability, or a token or something. That's the synergy you want to look forward to. So in your case, you're in a basic game situation, you're going to lose creatures via yourself or other players. So you want to enhance that with triggers of my creatures are dying for basic game interactions. How can I improve that? When a creature like Judas the Scourge Diva or Painter's Servant or something like that. What's the Painter? Not the Painter's Servant. The one that costs 2 mana, it's a 0/1. This is whenever a creature controlled dies, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life.
That's a vampire.
Yeah.
I probably got it in here.
Blood Artist.
Blood Artist.
Yeah. That's really top notch for that, that kind of strategy,
Mm-hmm.
right? So drawing cards and finding synergies for card draw and effects that enhance what you're doing is pretty solid, right? And one thing you want to look for synergies is how much can you do to increase your basic game interaction, right? Basic game interaction, right? Which is the next thing on the list is mana ramp and fixing. say mana ramp and fixing because I divide the two because not all colors mana ramp as well as mana fixing, because colorless in some cases is the best way you can mana fix. Where in green, you can mana fix all day, every day, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you want to get that out. We want to see how fast it is. You want at least 6 mana fixing spells plus additional synergies that fit your deck's theme, if possible.
Okay.
So mana fixing is important. That goes into perfect lands, fast lands. Like tri-lands are good for 3-color decks. Fast lands are good, but when you play those tap lands into the battlefield, tap lands are 2 colors. Those are really good. Fast lands are for your early games, if possible, when you got a first turn play or second turn play. But in this case, if you have no turn 1 play, you're going to play a slow land because it's going to fix your mana faster.
Right.
Which is, pretty thing. I mean, we don't have to get too heavy on this top part because everybody knows mana fixing is important here. Mana fixing is solid and needed, right?
Yep.
So that's second on the list because mana ramp and fixing and card draw are the 2 most important things in Magic. Next to the third thing, and we're talking part of the BREAD acronym right now, which we'll get more into that later. But we're talking about important things that are just so basic. Mana ramp, fixing, and draw helps build that tempo, the ability to get cards back in your hand from your graveyard or from the battlefield, from the graveyard, from your deck, right? Help refilling your hand to keep you in the game. And mana ramp and fixing helps you play those spells faster, more fluently, more consistent. That's what you want. Which brings us to our third thing you want to emphasize on when the deck is removal spells in your deck. You want about 7 removal spells in your deck, plus as much as you can add to your existing synergy and theme, right? Removal is important, so you want at least 7 removal spells. Most of it would be creature, planeswalker, and enchantment removal. Biggest, peskiest things. Artifacts are important too, but you don't face a lot of artifact decks, but it's good to have artifact removal into it as well if you can. Right, so but the 3 bigs are creatures, planeswalkers, and enchantments. Right, and you want 6 of those plus additional synergies that fit your deck's theme. Like if you are creature heavy deck, creatures that destroy creatures when they enter the battlefield are good. Or if you're running a spells managers deck and removal spells and instant sorcery, that's good. But if you're running an enchantment deck, like I do run an enchantment deck, I use enchantment for removal spells, so it's a little slow, but it helps the theme and buffs up later game synergies.
Mm-hmm.
But now you notice the first 3 things I talked about in this segment is card draw, mana ramp, and fixing and removal spells. Those are good. Now the 4th thing on here is really part of the third thing, which is the removal. But I put this on a separate note because I think it's important to notate. And give me a second. I have to clear my throat. All right. I'm back. Got some coffee in me. The 4th thing you need to care about, if it is possible in your color pie, is board wipes. Now, I can't give you a direct number on how many board wipes to run. But from my experience, I'd run 4 to 6 board wipes.
Oof.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
You don't have to cast them when they're in your hand, but it's always handy when you're behind. And I run about 4 to 6 board wipes in every one of my decks, except one. That's because I don't have board wipes for that deck. But you think board wipes are ridiculous? They're not ridiculous when you're behind. It's not ridiculous when you need it.
True. Yep. I think I got 2 board wipes in this Edgar Markov deck.
Yeah, and I think you're low on board wipes there.
I believe so.
But your deck can push out a lot of mana. For a board wipe like Ingrick's Wake is good, right? Destroy all creatures and planeswalkers you control. You don't control. Destroy all creatures and planeswalkers you don't control is Ingrick's Wake. Plague Wind, destroy all creatures you don't control. Or you can run Overwhelming Forces, which is like a $9 card. I'd pick this one up now if you have the money. It costs like 8 mana, which is expensive.
Hmm.
But you destroy all creatures target player controls. And you draw a card for each creature destroyed that way.
Oh.
Right? Then you run Decree of Pain. Decree of Pain is an old school staple. It's a little bit slower nowadays, but you destroy all creatures, and you draw a card for each creature destroyed this way.
Hmm.
You know, that is pretty solid, pretty nifty. Because you're doing two things there. Now you're board wiping, and that's one of the main things on this list. You're drawing cards. You're doing two of the 5 things on this list.
Right.
Right? So it's pretty powerful to have your card draw, your mana ramping, your removal spells, and your board wipes, right? Those are control aspects. And that the reason why on board wipes say 4 to 6, depending on your deck, if it's aggro, mid game, or control, you'll find out. Now, if you find board wipes that are in your theme, that's bonus points. Because not all board wipes are in your theme, but there are times you find a spell that says destroy all creatures with no auras attached to them.
Mm-hmm.
For Voltron, that's very themey. You can find removal spells that destroy target non-vampire creature.
I got a board wipe like that.
Right. There's things that people have, they do that run in their decks because they can't be used against them, which is really good.
Right.
Now,
Olivia's Wrath.
Yeah, Olivia's Wrath, pretty solid. The last thing on this list of five things you want to work on is very important, and you want to run this in every deck you control or own as possible in the colors you can. Now, what I'm about to say is very strong in black. It's very strong in green. It's actually fairly strong in white, but you're paying like 4 mana at least for this. There's versions of it in blue and some versions of it in red.
Okay.
That's Graveyard Recursion and Reanimation.
Oh.
So Graveyard Recursion is just being able to get stuff from your graveyard back to your hand. Right? Maybe you put them back in your deck, but you want it to go from your graveyard in your hand. White and black are really good with having spells that say return target creature from a graveyard to the battlefield.
Yep.
Green is really good for returning a creature, permanent, or a card from your graveyard to your hand. And black does that too.
Yep.
Blue likes to return instants and sorceries and artifacts from your graveyard to your hand. Red just really lacks on this. There's a couple out there. I don't know their names, but they return something from your graveyard to your hand. Well, like not much. And I think Artifact Colors has some abilities like that.
Okay. Now, how do I find do research to find cards that might work in my deck? I mean, how do I go about doing that? Well, let's say somebody don't know what cards are out there. They played Magic before, but they stepped away, and a bunch of cards has released, and they don't know nothing about those cards that has been released, or the cards from before they ever started playing Magic. How do they know what to look for, how to find it?
All right. Let me check something really quick. All right. Let me present screen, share screen. Now, a good resource that's really strong in ads too. So you go to edhrec.com and you can type in vampires, which I did before I showed the screen. So vampires are not literally the top commanders here.
Okay.
Like in the game. They're top commanders for vampires. But like you go to edhrec and you type in your vampires, which I did, and find Edgar Markov.
So where do you type vampires in at?
This search bar right here, that says search.
Well, okay.
Then you scroll down when you click on your commander. And it'll say high synergy cards. Cordial
Okay.
Vampire, Captivating Vampire, Legion Lieutenant are good cards. Indulgent Aristocrat, Welcoming Vampire, Elinda the Dusk Rose are really good.
Okay.
You got Edgar Charmed Groom, Drano Liberator Malachir, Cruel Celebrant. Yeah, Olivia's Wrath. So this list is literally building a deck for you. Talking about top cards, and like I know you have a lot of these cards in your deck,
Yeah, I do.
but there's a lot of synergies and card game changers. I guess they call.
Oh.
Yeah, these are good
Vampiric
cards.
Tutor.
Vampiric Tutor. Well, Demonic Tutor is better than Vampiric Tutor, but
Oh, well.
Vampiric Tutor is good because it costs 1 mana, but you put the card you looked for on top of your library. Demonic Tutor costs 2 mana, but it puts the card into your hand.
I don't have either one.
Well, for the price of like $120, you can own both.
Oh.
Right?
I got that. Yeah, I got that Smothering Tide, but it's not in my deck.
It's in another deck.
It's not in a deck at all.
Yeah, well, put it in your vampire deck.
Don't know what to take out.
Another
Another question.
Enlightened Tutor, good for enchantments. That Enlightened Tutor costs $27 or $28. That can search out for 1-year win cons right away. Then you got some more synergy cards. So EDH Rec is a good place to search for your vampires.
Okay.
All right.
Hey, Complete. What's going on?
Complete. I use a mobile app called Metabox. It's actually really good searching stuff. Lots of options. Nice. Never heard of Metabox before, to be honest with you.
Me neither.
Yeah. All right. I like that. But anyways. So graveyard recursion is really important. But the next thing I'm about to talk about, let me delete all that. I'm trying to make this simple for me to read. Is top deck control and tutors. Speaking of tutors that we saw, top deck and tutors that fetch for cards in your deck help control the chaos of randomness in the game's interactions. There's a lot of randomness in games interactions. You can't tell what your opponents are going to do all the time. So being able to have control over what can happen is powerful. Top deck control, like running Sensei's Divining Top, is really solid. Another card I like to use in green is Sylvan Library. Yes, Sylvan Library is very solid because you don't have to pay the life to draw the cards. You can just look at the top 3 cards, pick one, put one in your hand, and know what's on top of your library. You know, and top deck control, I should say manipulation, top deck manipulation. It's important. It helps you push the power level of your deck and helps any slack and synergy issues you're having in the game.
Okay.
All right. So, you know, you're going to want a Sensei's Divining Top in your commander deck. I'll put it in the card draw category and deck manipulation, you know. Top deck control is important as possible. Like I can promise you, I don't have all this in my deck. All the top deck manipulation in my decks. Because they kind of get expensive, as you saw with the tutors.
Yeah.
But top deck manipulation and tutoring is very powerful. That's why the cards cost a lot of money, is because everybody wants them for their decks.
So how many tutors should you have in your deck?
Well, tutors go through draw, so you want them in the 7+ in your deck.
7 tutors?
No, I'm saying you want the 7. Like you got 7 draw cards in your deck that I told you to put in earlier. Tutors work in your draw, so you put in that 7 draw. But I said plus 1 plus any additional added to your synergy. So we just added it as a draw card.
Oh, okay.
Because tutoring is strictly better than drawing.
Yeah.
Because drawing is a random fact, right? You draw a card at random. You don't know what's on top unless you're doing top deck manipulation. Right. You can tutor for that card you want and get the card you need at the time you want it.
Right.
Right. Yes. So top deck manipulation is pretty powerful, pretty good. And I can't stress it enough. That's on this list of things I'm talking about because it is important. Anything that helps you control your draw, help you get the cards you want is really good. Plus, if you have a good amount of card draw on your deck and you're manipulating what the top card of your deck is, like that tutor we saw that puts a card on top, you're help pushing the power of your deck. That's why they're called game changers, because it can literally change the game. Because if you're tuning for a card that can win you the game, it's on top of your deck. And plus, if you have an additional way to draw it, whoop, whoop, score. Big time score.
Mm-hmm.
So top deck manipulation is important to everybody. Tutoring is important. If you can get it. There are some cheap tutors out there, which I was able to find for one of my decks. But that was like for enchantments and stuff like that.
No.
Or more specifically, auras and equipments. My dog meat deck has aura equipment tutors in it that were fairly cheap. Like $7 was the most expensive one. $3 was like the cheapest one.
Ain't bad.
Yeah, but they search for like auras and equipments only. So, they're not going to search for everything in the deck. But they're tutors, and they're really good for the synergy.
Right.
Now, know what your deck needs with non-basic lands. Slow mana should fix your mana base faster, right? If you're going for slow mana, make sure the mana fixes your mana base quicker. Faster mana, like fast mana that comes in play untapped, that's more for the early game. If you have a turn 1 Soul Ring, you're gonna play your fast mana first, right? If you have a turn 1 Sensei's Divine Top, you're gonna cast that first with your fast mana. But in your deck, your slow mana should be multicolored and if possible, do things. Like one thing that people don't run enough of when it comes to having lands come into play tapped, and there's a lot of lands that come into play tapped, is creature lands. Creature lands, or also known as man lands, help your deck. Like in times, they survive board wipes, and when the game's open, you can swing in that little points of damage. When you don't have a big flashy spell to play, if you're a little behind, you can push that damage to get the game going faster. Now, I personally don't have a lot of man lands, and that's because I can't afford all the man lands all the time. But for the man lands I do have, I do put them in decks.
Okay. Hey, what's up, Robert's Table?
Robert's Table, good morning. Good afternoon. Good evening. Whatever time of day is for you. Hello. Now, know the importance of mana, but we're going to get to the next thing, which is the BREAD acronym. The BREAD acronym is important to know because if you're not playing with it, you got to play against it. Remember that. If you can't play with it, you're going to play against it. First of all, B for bread stands for bombs. Bombs stands for big creatures and splashy big spells. Things that help win the game, like big old creatures, right? Do you have big old creatures in your deck? If you don't, you got to play against it because someone else will have big creatures. If your win condition is not big creatures, you got to be able to survive big creatures.
Makes sense.
Right? The R in BREAD acronym stands for removal. Hence why we talked about it, because removal is important. Removals for creatures, enchantments, artifacts, planeswalkers, etc. You want to cover as much basis as you can for your lots of removal spells to destroy creatures, enchantments, artifacts, and planeswalkers. Because those are the main big things that you got to remove. I mean, there are battles, there are sagas you got to worry about, but most battles are battles, but sagas are enchantments. Like sagas are covered under enchantments, and you got to know the game. Not all removal spells are adequate, right? Like you need ways to exile indestructible creatures or give -1/-1 counters until they're dead. So know your removal. Have good removal. Whatever removal possible is. What's a good thing against removal? Blue. Not because it destroys a creature, because it can bounce a creature back to opponent's hand, giving you a swing in. Sleep is not a removal spell. Sleep is a good aggro spell for blue. It taps all creatures they control, and those creatures don't untap their control's next untap step, right?
Right.
So that gives you aggro, which we'll get to a little bit. Because after removal, we got E for evasion. Evasion is flying, trample, unblockability, and protection from. Right? Evasion is powerful. I mean, Hillbilly, do you like it when you cannot block my big old creature coming your way?
Nope. I hate it when I can't block.
Right? Blockability is so good. Or the other day when I won, you were really upset that I won with trample damage,
I couldn't do nothing.
right? And evasion is flying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Flying is harder to block with a non-flying creature. It's almost unblock. It's pretty much unblockable to a creature without flying,
Right.
or reach. Evasion is just harder to block. Evasion is important on creatures. If you can give a creature evasion, or in your case, some of your good vampires have evasion built onto them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing I wanted to talk about is protection from. A lot of people have to be reminded in games we play that protection from, like protection from black. Protection from black means a creature cannot deal damage or be dealt damage. Protection from black means a creature can't be dealt damage or targeted by black sources, meaning the creature cannot be blocked by black creatures, right? And the same would
Right.
be for protection from white, blue, green, red, right? Protection from red means you can't be targeted by red sources, can't be blocked by red sources, So invasion is very important. And Robert's table says, or steal bombs. I love blue. Blue steals creatures. Blue I throw into removal slot.
Yep.
Aggro. This is one of those things. If you're not playing against it, if you're not playing with it, you're playing against it. Aggro, you're attacking creatures and blockers, right? Mainly you're attacking creatures. How much are you attacking? Well, how many creatures are in your deck? How many creatures solidify your deck for attacking? How many creatures are in your deck that are for attacking? Or is your creatures sack fodder for triggers and abilities on the battlefield? Like, are you sacrificing your creatures instead of attacking to get to a bigger game plan, big goal? Think about that. That is important stuff. Right?
Right.
So, know your aggroness. Know your blocking. Know what your creatures can handle when you're building your deck. Because aggro is important to know if you're playing against it or with it. Like if you're playing against aggro, meaning you don't have a lot of aggro in your deck, you got to be able to go against it with removal spells, board wipes, and ways to get rid of creatures that will threaten your life total. So that's a good thing to think about. Now, draw mana fixing is the last thing. D for bomb, like D and bread is normally known for duds. Don't put duds in your deck, but I know everybody knows not to put a dud in their deck.
Yeah.
Right?
I'll try not to.
Right? Duds don't go in your deck. But I put draw and mana fixing for D. Now, I added mana fixing to the acronym because it's not breadem. It's draw and mana fixing, because draw is what you want. Mana fixing is how you set up your deck, right? Those are things that are important. Those are things to remember to put in your deck. So when you're building your deck, you want to know bombs, what bombs you have, what removal spells you have, evasion deck, what evasions in your deck, what aggro's in your deck, what draws in your deck, right? You want to know all that stuff, and you want to implement everything I've told you in your deck building process into your deck building process. Right? Bombs, removal, evasion, aggro, draw. Bombs, removal, evasion, aggro, draw. Remember that. Remember that. It's so good. So good to remember your bombs, removal, evasion, aggro, and draw. And mana fixing. Which brings us to tempo. Which we actually read this earlier, but tempo is what everything I described to you in this game is to help you with. And when you're building your deck, everything I described is to help you with your tempo, especially with draw, mana fixing, finding ways to tutor, and drawing cards in your synergies. Tempo. Tempo in definition is like the sound of music going through some stuff, the speed of which music resonates, in some words. But this brings us to tempo, speed at which cards can be played and gathered. Every time you play a card in your hand, you're losing tempo because you're losing cards in your hand. So tempo is about replenishing those cards, getting those cards in your hand. How fast you can cast spells, that cares about the lands you play, and how fast you can get lands in play, that cares about your ramp. How fast you can play spells and recoup lost cards. Every time you play a card, it's lost into the nether or the graveyard until you can get it back or draw a card. Reanimation, important. You'll lose cards through the game through the basic interactions, so you need to get this and recoup, help you build tempo from your hand. cards drawn from the top of your deck or recouped from the graveyard are important, helping you mitigate land drops losses. Like if you're losing land drops, draw helps you get there. But if you have good ramp, you should be ramping up your deck or fixing your mana. Your card draw helps you with that too. So you continue spells or hold mana back for removal and counter spells. Counter spells are also removals, people. Woo! Any questions?
I'll just say I got this creature right here behind me.
Right, Bishop of the Bloodstream.
All right. How do I decide what creature to take out to put this creature in? Or does my deck even need this creature?
Bishop. All right, I looked this up before.
Mm-hmm.
So he costs 3 generic, 2 black, 3/3. When Bishop of the Bloodstrained enters the battlefield, target opponent loses 1 life for each vampire you control. That's an aggressive card. I'd play that in a vampire deck full of vampires.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he counts himself, right? So he's 1.
Right.
If you have 4 other vampires out, that's 5. That's a 5 gap, right?
Correct.
He can help you win condition if you have a big board. If you have 7 vampires on the battlefield plus him, that's 8 damage.
Actually, you'd up that because Edgar will put a creature out on the battlefield too. It should see that, and shouldn't it?
Yeah, it will see that. I wasn't thinking about it because I was thinking about him being cast just by himself with vampires.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, with Edgar, since he is a vampire.
Right. No, yeah. Yeah, that vampire comes on cast, so that vampire will be on the battlefield before Bishop hits the battlefield.
Okay.
So he's an aggressive burn spell for black, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So what you replace it with is something that does very little compared to him.
Man.
So he Bishop of the Bloodstrain doesn't do a lot, but when it enters the battlefield, he targets a single player. Not each opponent, a single player. And he'll do that 1 damage for each vampire you control to that player. That's good for late game when your opponents are low life. Like, say your opponents are like 7 life and you have 5 vampires aboard and you drain them for 7 because of Edgar Markov and everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's player removal. You play it wisely.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Now, see a bunch of you out in chat. I hope you had a good watch. Is there any questions you guys have you want to ask me?
But how do you? All right. On getting your where would the cheapest place be at to get cards?
The cheapest place to seem to get cards would be TCG Player, but I'm not a big fan of TCG Player. When you buy off the basic site, like go to a friend's channel, see if they got the cards you want, like Tabalt, we know, or Matt Saxon, we know from Dark Ritual on TCG Player.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to buy from someone's single store than it is to buy from the whole store, or you get your cards shipped from different sources and not all at once. I prefer to go to Card Kingdom when I buy cards because I can get them all from one place and shipped all at once. And pretty fast and all together. Or my favorite way to buy cards is my local LGS if they have the cards.
Okay.
Local LGS is like supporting local LGS helps the environment of your local area, helps the store, the money goes back in the community and enriches the community to stay stronger, especially when you can get friends.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I've checked TCG Player for a card. I've checked Card Kingdom for the same card. One place is higher than the other.
Mm-hmm. Well, from my experience with Card Kingdom, you get the condition of the card normally the way it says.
Okay.
TCG Player, I've had a card that was a bit iffy once. That was not through Tabal. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And one tip, if you're buying cards online, buy in bulk because you're going to be paying the shipping for it anyways.
Yep.
Right? So if you're going to buy online, buy a good chunk of your deck list all at once. Get the best prices for the cards you want by searching and doing your research and due diligence. Because you're going to be paying shipping. You're going to be paying like $1 to $5 for your shipment anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Do not buy singles off Amazon.com. Do not buy singles off eBay unless you trust it. And I'm only saying this because I know eBay used to be a good place to buy singles, but I know there's a lot of controversy.
Mm.
Robert Stable says the Card Kingdom usually charges a slight premium, but they're very diligent on card condition, and they check to make sure it's not counterfeit. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I love it, Robert.
Okay.
So yeah. Like I have a lot of rapport with Card Kingdom. Like even one time when they messed up on an order, I got some free tokens out of it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was fun. So, anyways, I'm not saying they're going to make up for it and expect free cards out of mess ups all the time. It's just
Right.
they were nice. This is the first time. First time. Anyways, any other questions out there in the world?
It's all the questions I can think of to ask.
Did you feel like you learned a lot?
Yeah.
Were you able to keep up? Was I too fast or?
No.
All right. That's good to know. That's good to know because I was trying to be diligent with all my tips.
Mm-hmm. Great tips.
Mm. Yep. And then I try to think about all that stuff every time I build decks. Because it's important. Well, one thing I should clarify right away. Always play your decks when building them, right? If you get a deck that's not all the way complete, play it. Find your synergies that you might not know exist. Find cards that don't work. Sometimes you have a great idea and it just doesn't pan out. Or sometimes we don't have an idea of what cards are in your deck that do amazing things. Play your decks. Play them. Play your decks.
Mm-hmm.
Playing the game helps the player.
Yeah.
Indubitably. So, with that, so we can keep this video short, as it could be.
Well, here's a question: how do you know about how many dual lands to put into your lands? What is the most efficient amount of dual lands to put into a 3-color deck if there is no triumphs?
All right. So, in your deck, and I should have probably covered this and I didn't think about it. Check your mana curve and color pie. A mana curve is putting all your 1-drops in one pile. All your 2-drops in its own pile, 3 drops in its own pile. I've helped you do this before.
Mm-hmm.
All the way to your highest drops. Put them on an individual pile. 1 through, let's say 8. 8's the top number here.
Okay.
You got a pile of your 1-drops, 2 drops, 3 drops, 4 drops, 5 drops, 6 drops, 7 drops, 8 drops. All should be different sizes, except the cards you have most of should be closer together. You want to get an efficient amount of 1-drops to help your deck in general for an aggro deck or a fast-moving deck. You want your 2-drops to be closer to your 1-drops and your 3-drops to be around your 2-drops. Your 3 and 4 drops should be about even. Your 5 drops are more of your powerhouse cards in most games nowadays, so that should be a little more than your 3 drops. Your 6 drops could be more than your 5 drops, varying on your tempo and power level of you're running. But anyways, however you look at your color, you separate your deck into your mana curve and see your mana curve. You're going to see what's important. What cards do you need turn 1? Do you have enough 1-drops that you need turn 1 lands? Think about that. Fast lands. You want to put fast lands in your 1-drop color pies so that you get them out faster to play your 1-drop spells.
Mm-hmm.
Same with your 2-drops, 3-drop, I wouldn't worry too much about. Play your slow lands in. Get your slow lands in there for turn 3. You're not always playing something turn 1. Play your slow lands then. But how do you figure out what lands to go for? Here's what I look for, right? Here's how Tortoise does it. How to put your lands in the deck. First of all, I look at my 1-drops. If most of them are green, I'm putting a lot of green land in my deck, right? Out of 37, I'm going to divide that 37 as close as possible into 3 different colors. And I'm going to put mono green in one of the bigger piles. Right? If your color is mono black, your 1-drops are mono black and you got a plenty of them, you can put a lot of black in there. Then I'm going to look at the end card, the top of the mana curve, my late game spells. How many I have of those? I'm going to look at that and see what those are. And I'm gonna fluctuate my mana to fit that, right? So if my late game spells are red, I'm gonna put the second most red spells there, because between the first 1-drops and last drops, I should have both lands out while I'm fixing for the middle drop. But that's where you go. That's where you start. You get all the basic mana separated like that. Then you look at how much of a green sources you need. If you're heavier on green sources, you're going to start putting dual lands. Like if you have a red-green land, you're going to replace your red-green land with, like, if you have 2 red-green lands, put one in the forest spot, one in the mountain spot, right?
Okay.
And start evening and thickening the color bases out, because every green land you put in your red spot's an extra green land in your green spot is a dual land. Every red land you put in your green spot is going to add a red land to your red spot.
Okay.
And you're going to focus on getting all your mana, your dual lands, in by fixing to what you need first and last. Because your color, your third color, which should be quite even, because you're going to have, you're gonna adjust the colors based off what you want first and last, and you're gonna start putting dual lands in every slot. So find the colors that you want, right? That you want more of, like in your Madker Markov deck. How many black spells are you running? Right? How many black spells are you running in your first turn? How many black cards are you running in your last turn? Or mana curve? Right? How many 1-drops do you have in your mana curve? How many colored pips are in your 1 mana curve? How many colored pips are in your late game mana curve? Right?
Right.
Then you're gonna look at your in between, what you have most of. Like, what are you gonna need most? Right? If you're gonna need black mana, you're gonna have more black mana. Then you're gonna start putting your dual lands with black lands in your black mana and other colors. So you got more of it, fixing it. Then you're gonna play your deck to adjust the differences. Because what if you get flooded? That's a hard number to know before you play it. But to reiterate, I'll look at my low drops. And one low drops, I should say low drops. So your 1 and 2 drops, I'll look at what wants to come out first, what's good chance to be my hand first. That's why looking at your mana curve is important. And I try to fix the most lands in my deck to fit that. Then I look at my end game plan and I try to get mana ready for that. Then I look at my mid game and I'm like, okay, if there's like more red spells on my black, white, red deck, I'll put the least amount of those in because I'll draw into it. Because that will work. Because if I'm running the least amount of white spells in a red-black deck, basically, I'm not going to need it as much as I'm going to need these 2 colors by the end of the game. But if I have enough of it, I will draw into it. Okay. Drawing is important. Mana ramp is important. Right? Here's another way to think about it. In one deck I have that's blue, white, green. I have 3 white sources in this blue, white, green deck. That's because most of my deck is blue, green. My early game is green. My late game is blue and green. Right? But I have very few spells that run white. So I use my mana tutors, like Rampant Growth, Cultivate, and so on, to get my white mana out.
Okay.
Now, is that a wise decision? All the time, because, the light idea of land destruction is out there now. But I do run in my mana base Triome, 2 Triomes, I should say. They got the Triome and the one from Shards of Allura, the 3 colored lands. I do run dual lands to fix that. But my faster mana is green because most of my 1-drops are green.
Okay. So if I take these 2 cards here and swap them out. One is black and white. The other one's black.
Yeah.
That will change my mana also.
It'll change your curve. One's black white, and one's double black. When you look, well, they're the same curve because they're both 5 casting. If I'm looking at it right.
Let's see, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5. No,
All right, so that will replace the 4 one and put the 5 one in.
right.
Right. But your blood strain is more of a bigger hit than the other guy. He hits immediately, does nothing else. The other guy, if he lives, pings for damage every turn.
Correct.
So that decision is based off what your synergy is. Like if you have, like, he's more powerful right away than he is late game. The other guy is powerful if he lasts long enough. That makes sense?
Yeah.
All right. So, anyways, my friends, with all this gone in ado, I want to thank you guys for watching this video. Thank you for chilling this out. I want to keep this within an hour's length so it's rewatchable for you. Share this video with anybody who might need the help. Tell them to watch it all the way through. Tell them to like. Hey, subscribe if you're enjoying the content. If you learned something today, if I helped you, subscribe. Be awesome. Be amazing. But with that, I'll see you in tomorrow's show of Morning Coffee, and we'll play some Commander tomorrow night. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Thank you for being on, Hillbilly. You've been awesome.
Anytime.
And oh yeah, you're welcome. And everybody else out there in the world, you rock, you roll. Remember, you're loved. Someone's thinking about you, and if you can, make someone's day a little bit brighter, because he might be the change someone needs today. And with that, my friends, stay groovy. I totally want to thank you for watching today's video. I really appreciate it, 100%. Like this video as if it's your favorite kind of pizza, dude. And if you wouldn't mind, consider smashing that subscribe button and hit that bell for notifications. Every one of these things you do helps the channel out a lot.
The moves, the strategies, and the flair. Super fast quarters, he's running the show. The crowd goes wild wherever he goes. Shall some go. The Dodgers way. He's the one to watch, the king of MTG play.